Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Asha madam. Today, we are going to conduct the lecture on facial nerve. The competencies to be covered are 28.4 and 28.7. That is, describe and demonstrate branches of facial nerve and its distribution. Explain the anatomical basis of facial nerve palsy. The specific learning objectives of the lecture are: you should be able to describe facial nerve under following headings, that is nuclei of origin, functional component of the facial nerve, course and branch distribution of the facial nerve. You have to describe the connections of the facial nerve to different ganglia and how the fibers are distributed. Enumerate the blood supply of the facial nerve. Correlate anatomical basis. Remember the previous lecture, it is a mixed cranial nerve and it belongs to the nerve to the second arch. So it has the bronchomotor component as it supplies the muscles of facial expression of muscles of face. This is the facial nerve which arises between this is pons, this is medulla. So the junction of the pons just above the olive, you can see this. This is the facial nerve. So facial nerve is a mixed nerve which two roots, sensory and motor. The motor is bigger compared to the sensory root. And from where it arises from the brain stem between the junction of the pons and the medulla, just lateral to the abducent and medial to the vestibular cochlear nerve. Coming to the facial components, it has got sensory as well as motor. That is, the motor components are, it has the general visceral efferent, that is, it is giving secretomotor fibers through the superior salivatory nucleus. We had seen at the section at the lower end junction of the level of the pons, there was superior motor nucleus. Along with that, there was superior salivatory nucleus. So the superior salivatory nucleus will give the general visceral efferent fibers, which will be supplying the lacrimal glands, nasal and oral cavity through pterygopalatine ganglion, and it will be supplying the submandibular and sublingual salivary glands through submandibular ganglion. As we said, it is the nerve to the second arch, so it is having a broncho efferent or bronchomotor fibers, which is the special visceral efferent. The fibers arise from the motor nucleus of the facial nerve, which is situated in the lower part of the pons. It will supply the muscles of facial expression. Along with that, it will supply stapedius, posterior belly of digastric and stylohyoid muscle. Now, the afferent components to it, that is a sensory component to it, are general somatic afferents. That is, if you see, there is a ganglion situated over here. After the nerve arises, there's a ganglion. This ganglion is called as geniculate ganglion. The sensory fibers are arising from the geniculate ganglion. What are the general somatic afferent? It is carrying afferent from the tympanic membrane, external acoustic meatus, skin behind the pinna, and also the proprioceptive fibers from the facial nerve. They will come and relay in this geniculate ganglion and then go inside. The special visceral afferent, that is your taste sensation fibers, also are carried through the facial nerve. They are carried again through this geniculate ganglion. They will go to the nucleus of solitary tract over here. If you recall, the facial nerve is going to carry the taste sensation from anterior 2/3 of the tongue, except from the circumvallate papillae. Motor component, or the motor part of the facial nerve, it arises as a separate motor unit filament from the pons. We had seen this. if you see the motor nucleus of the pons, it is under the control of cortical, that is cerebrum. What is the connection? It is connected through corticonuclear fibers. That is, in the cerebrum, the precentral gyrus, which is the motor gyrus, has control over the motor function of the body, also giving fibers. This will give connection to all the cranial nuclei, but if you see, they will be crossing over to the opposite side. So it will be under the control of the cerebral cortex of the opposite side. That is, the right side will give fibers to the left motor nucleus. But in the facial nerve, the part of the motor nucleus which supplies the forehead eyelids is having control from both the sides, right and left side. The other fibers, the lower fibers of the face, will be controlled only by the opposite side. This is very important. Remember, the fibers of the motor fibers to the forehead and eyelid muscles are going to be applied or under the control of both the cerebral hemisphere. It is having bilateral supply, whereas the lower fibers is from the opposite side. The sensory root of the facial nerve is also called as nervus intermedius. As we said, the geniculate ganglion, which is situated in the path of the facial nerve, we will see in detail later, will have the afferent fibers, that is general somatic afferent and the special visceral afferent fibers. So these general afferent fibers, we said they are extroceptive impulses, right? And the special visceral afferents are taste sensations. They will come and relay over here, and from there they will go through the sensory route to go, and the taste sensation will relay in the nucleus tractus solitarius, upper part of the nucleus tractus solitarius. From there, they cross over to the opposite side to form the solitary-thalamic tract to project into the thalamus in the VPL nucleus of the thalamus. Now, we will look at the course of the facial nerve. Listen to me very clearly. The nerve crosses many areas. Like it is going to arise from the pons, then in the posterior cranial fossa, then in the petrous part, then it goes out in the gland. So we will describe each part as different courses, like intracranial course, intrapetrous course, right? So now as we all know, it arises from the pons. So we have to know the intracranial course first, that is intrapontine course it is known as. If we have taken the section, or we have seen the cross section of the lower pons, where the motor nucleus of the facial nerve is situated, then is the superior salivatory nucleus. Just in front we had the abducent nucleus situated, and the upper end of the tractus solitarius was present, and this is the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal and the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. So in the intrapontine course, if you recall, the motor fibers of the facial nerve, they arise from the nuclei and they will cross dorsally over the abducent nuclei, and this elevation over here in the floor of the fourth ventricle is called as facial colliculus. So this turn of these fibers of the facial nerve are called as internal genu. Genu means bend, and this is present inside the cranium. So in the intrapontine part, this is called as internal genu. After that, the motor fibers will come out from the pons at the junction of the pons and the medulla. So this is motor fibers. Coming to the sensory fibers, the geniculate ganglion, these fibers will be carried to the geniculate ganglion. They will go to the solitary nucleus or tractus solitarius nucleus. The efferent fibers go from the superior salivatory nucleus, which will go from here, and also the general somatic afferent fibers will be arising from here. So if you have to remember, in the intrapontine course, you have to recall the genu. Then it is attached to the brain stem over here, that is between the abducent medially and vestibulocochlear at the junction of the pons and the medulla. They will arise as two different routes, that is a sensory route and the motor route. Now, through the posterior cranial fossa, as we said, it will arise as two routes. just related to the vestibulocochlear nerve at the junction, cerebropontine angle. It will go from there, it will pass to the internal acoustic meatus. So what is happening from the coming from the pons, it approaches the internal acoustic meatus. In the internal acoustic meatus, 7th and 8th nerve go together. Along with that, it will have labyrinthine artery. So what structures will be entering to the internal acoustic meatus is your 7th cranial nerve, facial, vestibulocochlear, and labyrinthine artery. Now, the internal acoustic meatus will take it to the petrous part of the temporal bone. In the petrous part of the temporal bone is situated your ear cavity, that is your inner ear cavity and the middle ear cavity, which will lead to the external or outer ear cavity. The internal acoustic meatus will go into the inner ear cavity, towards the inner ear cavity. So this part is called as intrapetrous course. This intrapetrous course again can be subdivided into units, like it is called as the meatal part. First is called as the meatal part. This is the internal acoustic meatus. If you see it is divided into different areas. So here the sensory root and the motor root will be running through it, where there will be a groove for it, which is present at the anterior-inferior surface. After they go here, here you remember the sensory root of the facial nerve will separate the motor root and the vestibulocochlear nerve. So they are running parallel to each other. If you see over here, there's a canal. This is opening for the facial nerve. The facial nerve will enter through this part to go into the later part. So here, when it enters through the facial canal, over here, these two roots, that is sensory root and the motor root, will join together to form a single trunk. In the facial canal, again it is divided into three parts. So see, you can see initially it was two different roots, but entering into the facial canal, that has become one trunk. The first part or the first segment of the facial canal, this part, is called as labyrinthine segment. This labyrinthine segment is present laterally to the vestibule of inner ear. So from the inner ear, this will traverse and go towards the anterior part of the middle ear cavity. That is the medial wall of the anterior part. So it is going to go from the inner ear, it will traverse towards the anterior end of the middle wall of the middle ear cavity. So when it is reaching the anterior most part, here it bends. This bend part, if you see, it is going to be, there's a collection of ganglion, and this is called as geniculate ganglion. And this bend is called as external genu. We had seen the internal genu in the pons. This is the external genu. So labyrinthine part is the segment of the facial nerve in the facial canal, which is going from the inner ear to the anterior part of the middle ear cavity. Now, after this geniculate ganglion or the bend, as I said, it is bending. So from the anterior end of the middle ear cavity, it is going towards the posterior end of the middle ear cavity, towards the medial wall of the middle ear cavity. And this part is called as tympanic segment. So also it is running horizontally, so it is called as horizontal part, one and the same. From the genu, from the ganglion, geniculate ganglion, from anterior end of the middle ear cavity to the posterior end of the middle ear cavity towards the medial wall, this part is called as tympanic segment or horizontal part of the facial nerve. Now, it has reached the posterior end of the middle ear cavity. From there, if you see this part, it is running inside the bone and inside the mastoid bone. So it is called as mastoid segment or vertical segment. It is present actually inside the bone. So, and it is running vertical. So it is called as mastoid or vertical segment. It will start from the posterior end of the medial wall of the middle ear cavity. It will go in vertically downwards till it reaches a point or a foramina which is present between the styloid process and the mastoid process. You all have seen this foramina which is called as stylomastoid foramina. So through the styloforamina it will come out of the cranium. We will watch this video. Look at this video. If you see the video, this is the floor of the fourth ventricle. In the floor of the fourth ventricle, we have these nerves arising. The cerebellum has been removed. So if coming from the lateral angle, you have the vestibulocochlear nerve over here. And just adjoining to that, you have the facial nerve. These nerves will arise from here. They will enter into the internal auditory meatus. Internal acoustic or auditory meatus is one and the same. If you see in the dry bone, this is your internal auditory meatus. If you really see into it, as we said, this meatal part is divided into, this is the facial canal above one, and here is your vestibulocochlear nerve from where it will come out. In the facial canal, it will enter into the petrous part, and in the from the inner part, it will come over here. And then this we have shown the external acoustic meatus. The tympanic membrane has been removed. This is the stylomastoid foramina from where it will come. So if you recall your course again, in the posterior cranial fossa, the nerve was going to be formed. After it is formed, it will enter the internal acoustic meatus. In the internal acoustic meatus, it is going this. We are going towards the internal acoustic meatus. This is the internal acoustic meatus. It will enter the facial canal. From the facial canal, it is going to the anterior part where it is forming a bend. This is called as external genu, where you have the situation of the geniculate ganglion. From there, it is entering into the middle ear cavity, going from the anterior part of the middle ear cavity to the posterior end of the middle ear cavity related to the medial wall. So this is the horizontal part now, or the tympanic part. Again, then it will come into the vertical part, which is going through the mastoid process to come out of the stylomastoid foramina. So this is the intrapetrous course of the facial nerve. What we said, from the genu over here arises a nerve which is called as greater petrosal nerve. We will see in detail later. For now, you remember from here it arises, and from the vertical part there is nerve to stapedius, and another nerve which comes from the vertical part is cauda tympani. This will be going along the tympanic membrane and then come out of the anterior part of the middle ear cavity to enter to the infratemporal fossa. So now we have seen the intracranial part of the facial nerves. We have reached up to the stylomastoid foramina. Once it reaches the stylomastoid foramina, it crosses the styloid process and pierces the posteromedial surface of the parotid gland. And when it pierces the posteromedial surface of the parotid gland, it will line the substance of the parotid gland, where it divides into two branches first, or two trunks. It is called as temporofacial segment division and the cervicofacial trunk. So we have temporofacial trunk and the cervicofacial trunk. As these will again redivide into different small branches of 5 branches, that is temporal, zygomatical, buccal, marginal mandible and cervical branch, to supply the facial muscle. This branching pattern appears like a feet of a goose or the duct. So it is called as pes inserens. You have to remember the branching pattern of the facial nerve in the parotid to supply all the facial muscles is called as pes inserens. So these are the terminal branches of the facial nerve. So now we have seen the course in detail, that is after it arises from your intracranial course, then intrapetrous course, which was divided into meatal part, tympanic part, and the vertical mastoid part, then coming of the stylomastoid foramina, how it enters the parotid gland, and that gives the branches. So what are the branches of the facial nerve? Within the facial canal, we had seen the moment it enters into the facial canal, the meatal part it turns, and this turning part is called as external genu. From the external genu, there is the facial. There is a geniculate ganglion. Arising from the geniculate ganglion, we have a nerve which is called as a greater petrosal nerve, which is known as greater petrosal nerve. And coming from the part, we have one branch which is called as nerve to the stapedius. Going down below in the vertical part downwards, we have another branch which is called as chorda tympani. We will see each branch in detail. Coming to the greater petrosal nerve, as we said, it is arising from the geniculate ganglion. It is responsible for carrying the parasympathetic fibers. After it arises from the geniculate ganglion, it pierces the roof or the anterior part and the roof of the middle ear cavity to enter through a hiatus to enter into the middle cranial fossa. Once it goes into the middle cranial fossa, it will go towards the foramen lacerum. When it is approaching towards the foramina lacerum, it is joined by another nerve which is called as the deep petrosal nerve. This deep petrosal nerve is carrying sympathetic fibers which are present around the internal carotid artery, the greater petrosal nerve will join with the deep petrosal nerve to form the nerve of the pterygoid canal, which will go through the nerve of the pterygoid canal foramina to go towards the pterygopalatine fossa, where it will relay in the pterygopalatine fossa, and the postganglionic fibers which are after the relay will go and supply the lacrimal gland, the glands in the nose, palate and pharynx. Now coming to the another branch which is the nerve to the stapedius. It is obviously arising from the vertical part to supply the stapedius muscle which is present in the middle ear cavity. This muscle is used for dampening the excessive vibration of the stapedius. In a case of stapes is a ossicle, ear ossicle, so that we can protect the ear from the high pitched sounds. The third branch which we saw coming from the vertical part over here, it is the chorda tympani. It arises just above the stylomastoid foramina. How much above the stylomastoid foramina? 6 mm above. This is to be recalled. 6 mm above the stylomastoid foramina it will arise. Then it will run upwards and forwards in the bony canal until it reaches the lateral wall of the middle ear cavity. That is your tympanic membrane. So just related to the inner surface of the tympanic membrane, it will cross from posterior end to the anterior end of the middle ear cavity. So it is crossing in relation with the eardrum or the tympanic membrane to come to the anterior part, where it pierces through the pterygotympanic fissure, and from the pterygotympanic fissure it will go into the infratemporal fossa. When it reaches the infratemporal fossa, it is related to the spine of the sphenoid. The spine of the sphenoid, one side you have chorda tympani, on the other side you have auriculotemporal nerve which is related to it. As it goes down, it will join with the lingual nerve. Through the lingual nerve, it goes to the submandibular region to relay in the submandibular ganglion to give secretomotor fibers to the submandibular ganglion gland and the sublingual gland. Also, it is responsible, the lingual nerve is responsible for carrying the taste sensation from anterior two-thirds of the tongue. Now, after it exists, when it is coming out of the stylomastoid foramina, it gives some branches. What are the branches it gives over here? Immediately, it gives one branch which is called as posterior auricular nerve. Then it gives nerve to the digastric and nerve to the stylohyoid. The posterior auricular nerve, immediately after it comes out of the stylomastoid foramina, it will give a branch which is called as posterior auricular nerve. This posterior auricular nerve supplies the posterior auriculus muscle, the occipitalis, and the intrinsic muscles of the back of the auricle. So it is giving different muscular branches after it arises. If just below the posterior auricular nerve, the branch arises, which is called as muscular branch, which will go give and supply the digastric muscle, that is the posterior belly of digastric. From this branch, there's a very small branch coming, which will go and supply the stylohyoid muscle. So just below the stylomastoid foramina, we saw there was a posterior auricular branch, digastric branch, and the stylohyoid branch. Now, as it enters the posterior medial surface, then it will divide into two trunks. Then it will give the terminal branches. These are the 5 terminal branches. That is the temporal, zygomatic, which will again re-divide into facial, and the buccal will divide into upper buccal and lower buccal. Then we have the marginal mandibular, and then we have the cervical branch. So this all immediately will be distributed to all the muscles. These are the terminal branches of the facial nerve. They are the 5 branches. You can relate them or remember them by keeping your hand this way. That is temporal, zygomatical, buccal, mandibular, and cervical branch. These were the branches, right? So we saw the branches in the petrous part, that is in 3 branches over there. Stylomastoid foramina, after it comes out 3 branches, and these are the 5 terminal branches. Now we all have spoken about ganglions related to the facial nerve. What were these ganglions? First ganglion we saw was the geniculate ganglion, which is present at the external genu of the facial nerve, which is the bent part between the meatal part and the tympanic part. That is acute bend of the facial nerve in the meatal part, intrapetrous part, and the horizontal part, that is the tympanic part. It is related to the middle ear cavity or the medial wall of the middle ear cavity. It is a sensory ganglion because we said the sensory fibers, that is the somatic afferents, general as well as special, that is taste sensation, will be relaying over here. The another ganglion which we saw was the submandibular ganglion. How did we relate it? There was a chorda tympani nerve which was coming from here, going through the lingual nerve, and the fibers were relaying in the submandibular ganglion, so that the postganglionic fibers will go to the submandibular and the sublingual salivary gland. So the lingual nerve is the nerve which will be carrying the preganglionic fibers along with the chorda tympani. These are arising from superior salivary nucleus, which will pass through the facial nerve, and the facial nerve will give this chorda tympani from the vertical part or the mastoid part, and then it will come through the petrotympanic fissure to enter the infratemporal fossa and join the lingual nerve. The third ganglion which we spoke about related to the facial nerve is the pterygopalatine, or it is called as spinopalatine ganglion. It is the largest peripheral. What is the relation over here? From the geniculate ganglion, we have the greater petrosal nerve we saw, which will join the deep petrosal nerve to form the nerve to the pterygoid canal, which goes and relays in the pterygopalatine ganglion to supply the lacrimal gland, mucous gland of the nose, paranasal sinuses, palate, and pharynx. Now, to summarize the course, we saw the intracranial course, that is, it is forming the internal genu, facial colliculus. Then it comes out from that, then it will go into the, that is intrapontine part, go through the posterior cranial fossa we saw along with the vestibulocochlear nerve. In the intrapetrous part we saw it went through the internal acoustic meatus, meatal part, then in horizontal or the tympanic part, then the mastoid part. In the facial canal, we saw 3 parts: labyrinthine segment, tympanic segment, and mastoid segment. It came out from the cranium through the stylomastoid foramina. Then in the extracranial course, we saw pierced the posterior medial surface of the parotid gland to give the terminal branches. What were the branches? Within the facial canal, we saw greater petrosal nerve coming from the genu. or the geniculate ganglion, then the nerve to the stapedius, then chorda tympani nerve. At the stylomastoid foramina, exit from the stylomastoid foramen, we saw the posterior auricular nerve, nerve to the digastric, nerve to the stylohyoid muscle. And the terminal branches which we saw was temporal nerve, zygomatic nerve, buccal nerve, marginal mandible and cervical branches which will supply all the muscles of the facial expression of facial muscles. Ganglion related to the facial nerve was three ganglion we saw. One was the geniculate ganglion, which is a sensory ganglion. The somatic afferents will be relayed over here. The greater petrosal nerve arises from here, forming the nerve to the pterygoid canal. Then we saw the submandibular ganglion, that is the chorda tympani nerve, which will join to the lingual to go to the submandibular ganglion to supply the submandibular and sublingual salivary gland. Another, we saw that this nerve to the pterygoid canal goes to the pterygopalatine ganglion to give secretomotor fibers to the lacrimal gland and the mucus glands situated in the palates. The blood supply of the facial nerve, it gets blood supply from four origin. One is the anterior inferior cerebral artery at the cerebropontine junction. In the labyrinthine segment, it gets the branch from the labyrinthine artery, which is again a branch of anterior inferior cerebral artery. It gets branches from the middle meningeal artery to the superficial petrosal artery at the area of the geniculate, that is the anterior part, geniculate ganglion. Then at the stylomastoid foramina, it gets a branch from the posterior auricular artery, which is supplying the mastoid segment. Applied part where the nerve will be injured. Accordingly, we will get the signs and symptoms. So according to that, we divide it into supranuclear part. Supranuclear part is that the corticonuclear fibers. Under the cerebral cortex, the motor nucleus is controlled. So if the lesion is in the upper motor neuron, present in the motor neurons of the cerebral cortex, the symptoms will be seen as supranuclear part. Here, as we said, the corticonuclear fibers of the upper part, that is forehead and eyelid, is having bilateral control. So if it is a unilateral lesion, these muscles will be spared because the bilateral will take over. Now, the nuclear part, as the motor nucleus of the facial nerve is situated in the level of the pons, at the lower end of the pons, along with the abducent and corticospinal tract. So we had seen this will be, we have already seen this in the section of the pons. There's a syndrome which is called as Millard-Gulbar syndrome. So it will going to be associated over here with other symptoms like hemiplegia will be there along with the facial nerve paralysis in the nuclear segment. The infranuclear paralysis, which will take part, can take part from the meatal part, tympanic segment, mastoid segment, or out below the stylomastoid foramina. So this all is called as infranuclear paralysis, and if it is present below the stylomastoid foramina, then we call it as Bell's palsy. We will see each in detail. The supranuclear paralysis, we said, as the upper part, that is the fibers which are supplying the forehead and the eyelid are having bilateral control, they will be spared in the upper motor neuron paralysis or the supranuclear paralysis. So there will be opposite side face paralysis, but the lower face will be paralyzed. The upper part of the face will be spared. The nuclear paralysis is going to be because of the, along with the abducent nerve and the corticospinal tract, contralateral hemiparalysis will be there, and same-sided facial nerve paralysis will be there with hyperacusis because the stapedius muscle will be also paralyzed and there will be loss of taste sensation. So this is called as Millard-Gulbar syndrome, alternative facial hemiplegia. To the infranuclear facial paralysis, it is a lower motor neuron type of lesion of the facial nerve, which will cause paralysis of all the muscles, but of the same side. See, supranuclear will be opposite side, but Infranuclear will be same side, and all the muscles. In the supranuclear, what was spared was the upper fibers were spared. Here it will not be spared. There will be facial paralysis, that is flaccid weakness of the muscle, of all the facial expression muscles, lower as well as upper. So it is complete paralysis. Now, if the paralysis can take place at the genu, that is the if the paralysis at the geniculate ganglion, there will be decreased lacrimation, reduced taste sensation, stapedius muscle will be involved, so hyperacusis will be there, and along with that there will be Bell's palsy of the affected side, same side. Suppose the paralysis of the nerve is below the stylomastoid foramina, then it is called as Bell's palsy. What are the causes of it? As this is related to the medullary cavity, if it is a sudden exposure to the cold, any medullary infections will lead to it. Any tumor of parotid or the medullary will lead to infranuclear paralysis. It will be partial or complete depending on the lesion. If there is only edema or partial compression, it will lead to partial lesion. But if there is complete obstruction or because of the tumor, then it will be complete paralysis. What is Bell's palsy? We said the infranuclear or lower motor nuclear paralysis of the facial nerve below the stylomastoid foramina is called as Bell's palsy. It is, if you see the face is asymmetrical, it is an idiopathic paralysis of the facial nerve. It is very sudden in onset. Why you call it as Bell's palsy? Because it was described or first shown by Sir Charles Bell in 1921. He demonstrated that there's a sensory innervation of the motor and motor innervation of the facial nerve are two different entities, and then he described this, so we call this as Bell's palsy. It is the most common type of lower motor neuron facial palsy. Incidence is about 15 to 40 cases per 1 lakh cases you see Bell's palsy. It is more in women, that is 3.3 more times in pregnancy, and that also more in third trimester of the pregnancy. Age, it can occur at any age, but it is more common in the middle-aged group people. Side involvement, it is not that it will be right side or left side, but it is usually unilateral. Bilateral is very, very rare. Increased occurrence is seen more in, we said, in the females, and then in the early diabetic hypertensive, it is more common, and obviously in women during pregnancy. He said it is in the, or even post-delivery, that is in the postpartum. Third trimester is most common, but in postpartum also you can see the facial palsy. First thing you notice in the Bell's palsy is asymmetry of the face. What is the etiology? What causes this? It can be idiopathic. The cause is not known. There can be infection by the virus like herpes zoster, herpes simplex can cause it. Another viruses also can lead to it. That cytomegalovirus or herpes virus which can cause it. Or even sometimes after giving the viral vaccine, that is influenza vaccine, it can lead to this symptom. To see the clinical features, the person will say that all of a sudden I got this paralysis. That is, they get maximum paralysis in 48 hours. The moment it starts, within 2 days, they will say that the whole face was paralyzed. So these were the things. Clinically, most severity will go on increasing up till the 5th day. Usually they will complain of pain around the ear, behind the ear. That could be the preceding cause, any infection around the ear. Taste also will have some degree, but over the time it comes over, hyperacusis or distortion of sound is also complained by the patient. Paralysis is partial in 30% and complete in 70% of cases. As I told you, it is unilateral, mostly unilateral. In 1% of the cases, it might be bilateral. Now, when you examine the person, this was your sign. complaints. Now, if you see the face is asymmetrical. You can see this is asymmetrical of the face. Here you can see all the folds. This is asymmetrical. What has happened? The transverse rings of the forehead, which are present here, are absent here. So transverse rings of the forehead are disappeared. The eyebrow drops, drooping of the upper eyelid is there. The palpable fissure is wider because the person cannot close the eyes. The corneal reflex will be lost, and as the closure of the eyelid is not taking place, there can be corneal ulcers. The lower eyelid, if you can see, is turned outward, and this is called as ectropion. And because of that, the tears which are formed in the eyes will be dribbling down. So that is called as epiphoria. The person cannot smile easily. You can see what this side face, I'll close the eyes or even raise the eyebrows. The inability to close the eyelid is called as Bell's sign. It can be asked as a MCQ for you. So inability to close the eyelid is called as Bell's sign. Obviously, as you cannot close the eyes, there will be loss of the blinking reflex. You can illustrate the blinking reflex, it will be lost, or the corneal reflex will be lost. If you see the nasolabial fold, which is present on the normal side, will be absent over here. When you are breathing quietly, your nasal ala of the nasa, they keep moving, but they will not move on the affected ipsilateral side. The tip of the nose will be deviated to the sound side. The angle of the mouth will be motionless. This is the angle of the mouth, is motionless. The corners of mouth will be drooping downwards towards the affected side. Obviously, there will be slurred speech. Whistling will not be possible because the vaccinator will be not functioning. So whistling, the air will blow from this side of the mouth. When the person is trying to eat food, the food will start accumulating on that affected side in the vestibule of the mouth. The face appears like mask because there will be no expression on that side of the face. Obviously, some loss of alteration of the taste is seen. So these are the signs and symptoms, or symptoms which we signs we will see in the Bell's palsy. What is the post and prognosis of the Bell's palsy? Partial paralysis always resolves completely within few weeks. Within few weeks, the person will become normal with medication like steroids, antiviral medications are given to that person, or the cold, if it is because of the cold middle ear cavity infection or caries infection, then accordingly the treatment will be given. And recovery for complete paralysis takes a longer time compared to the partial paralysis, obviously, but it will take about a month or so. There is recovery in about 60 to 70% of the cases. Approximately 15% of the patients are left with very small residual. Thank you everybody for patient listening, and good afternoon to everybody. With a smiling face, you can see both all these nasolabial fold, everything is normal, so the face is very expressive. Non-expressive asymmetrical face is the clinical sign to look for the facial nerve paralysis.